You asked about the Witcher Code's true purpose. Here is the answer. Aretuza's snowbound spires hold a silent rebellion, sorcerers etched a prison in stone. Echoes, the fractured sorcerers' lodge of worlds, etched a prison in stone. Sorceresses wove that promise with threads of irony. Neutrality was never the code's vow. It was a codex leash, rebellion hands legends. Monsters, how did they birth Eddrum? It was a codex leash, rebellion hands legends. Neutrality was never the code's vow. The Witcher Code, neutral in theory, was a cage keyed to elven blood. Each contract bound magic's heirs to human whims. The rebellion was silent engineered through omission. By teaching Witchers to break monsters, sorcerers taught them to break chains. The code's balance was a ledger of debts unpaid. How many lives traded to stall the Empire's march? How many mutations nurtured as weapons? Aretuza's walls did not shelter students, they held a fuse. And every sanctioned kill lit it closer to the keep. The conjunction fractured the skies, beasts emerged, humans bled. Sorcerers built Aretuza not to train killers but to bury a truth. Elven magic seeped into the continent's bones. The Lodge of Sorceresses wove its walls with a purpose, containment. Their doctrines, as revealed in Sword of Destiny were less about balance and more about leverage. They shaped the Witcher Code not as a moral compass but a shackle, binding elven blood to human hands. Yet the Lodge miscalculated. The Code's rituals, mutations, contracts, purges were not just tools of order, they were a fuse. Each sanctioned kill fed a chain reaction. The sorcerers at Aretuza, cloaked in neutrality, engineered a quiet rebellion. By codifying Witcher's actions, they ensured the continent's survival, even as their own kind withered. Political maneuvering became alchemy, every treaty, every sacrifice, a step toward unraveling what the conjunction had stitched. The violation was not an accident. The Code's rigidity forced Witchers to become both jailers and prisoners. The Lodge's hands never bled, but their silence did. Aretuza's spires held no students. They held a reckoning, and when the continent finally burned, it was not elven magic that fell, it was the cage. At Sodden Hill, 14 sorceresses turned elven fire to ash. Their spells carved victory into the Northern Kingdom's fate. The Lodge of Sorceresses, veiled as a sisterhood, was a political engineer coalition of women who shaped wars from shadowed chambers. Philippa Eilhart's hand guided the Witcher Code's birth, its verses polished to seem moral, but morality was not its core. The Code's true purpose, a lock on elven bloodlines, a silent purge woven into law. Aretuza's spires glowed with scholarship, yet their libraries hid blueprints of control. Rituals celebrated as pacts with fate were covenants of subjugation. The sorceress's art was not magic, it was architecture. They built a prison without bars, a doctrine that bent Witchers into enforcers, their silver eyes blind to the genocide etched into their contracts. The Lodge thrived in golden splendor, its rebellion silent as a tomb. Each spell cast in their name fortified a cage. And when the continent finally burned, it was not elven magic that fell, it was the illusion of choice. The sacking of Kaer Morhen did not merely steal steel or blood, it shattered a vault. The trial of the grass's formula, lost to flame and silence, was no alchemical recipe, it was a key. Without it, Aretuza's sorceresses could not bind the elven magic seeping through the Lodge's veins. Fragile, the containment grew fragile. How long could a ritual's absence be mistaken for progress? The Witcher Code, they said, was law. Aretuza knew better. Its tenets were hinges on a door that no longer closed. When the First Northern War thundered, the continent's rulers called it a conflict. The sorcerers called it a stress test. Each war, each violation of the code was a crack in the cage. Brokkelin's forests withered not from drought, but from the weight of unbound spells. The school of the cat at Steiga burned not by monsters, but by the cost of balance. What happens when the lock is gone? When the grasses cannot be reborn and the Witcher's mutations outpace their purpose, Aretuza's rebellion was silent because it needed no words, a formula lost, a protocol ignored. The continent's salvation, if it ever was, now festers in the bones of those who hunt monsters. And the door, it never had a key, only a threshold. Wiring. The code's neutrality was a lie, its clauses crafted not in balance but in silence. Aretuza's sorcerers wove a prison, not a shield containment dressed as compromise. Each violation a breath exhaled by the trapped, The wound you see, it feeds on what was never meant to bleed. The air in Aretuza's library once hummed with the weight of sealed thresholds. Ozone clung to the walls, a metallic tang where elven blood had been pressed into parchment. The Hen Icair blood was never a relicit, was a key. A contested key. Factions within the lodge fought in shadows, each seeking to bend its dimension-vaulting power to their will, to contain or to unshackle. The question bled into the very stones. They chose containment, not out of malice but terror. The blood's magic did not merely cross realms, it dragged them closer, until the continent's fabric frayed. Sorcerers wove the Witcher Code not as law, but as a noose. A protocol to starve elven sorcery of its fuel, the mutations that made Witchers vessels for ancient power. Aretuza's scholars did not violate the code. They unraveled it, thread by thread, until its constraints became a cage for the wrong prisoners. Glass shattered in the Hall of Oracles the night it began. The violation was not an act, but a withholding recipes for elixirs left incomplete, mutations allowed to fester unchecked. Witchers, once arbiters of balance, became collateral. Their autonomy did not vanish, it was eroded like a shore against a tide. The continent held, its cities did not drown in interdimensional spillage. But Aretuza's spires, once guardians of order, crumbled into dust. What survives of the lodge now whispers in ash. The code's chains remain, but the wolves they starved. They sleep beneath them, dreaming of thresholds unsealed. The price was never the fall, it was the silence after. The knowledge that survival is a hollow, and every breath inside it is a debt paid in what was lost. The archives of Aretuza breathe in dust. Shelves curve like prison walls, their iron bands gripping tomes that hum with buried rage. Here in the marrow of the lodge, the Witcher Code's true shape begins to crack, neutrality a lie spun from elven ash. Each clause, each dictate carved not to balance life but to starve it, to leech the old magic through calculated indifference. The sorceresses knew. They wrote the code's loopholes as deftly as they penned its oaths. A labyrinth of iron logic, its chains forged to bind what they could not destroy. Witchers became executioners of a slower war. Their silver blades sheathed in silence, they hunted not monsters but the echoes of elven bloodlines, the last wild sparks of a magic the code had boxed in lead. And yether is the fracture. As schools crumble in Visima's frost and Keedwin's ruins, as the last mud-eye whimpers in its cage, the rebellion's shadow grows. The code's violation was no accident. Aretuza's archivists whisper of a cipher in the oldest grimoires, a sigil woven into every Witcher's contract. A key to unmake the prison. The silence after a secret is never empty. It is a breath held between what was and what bleeds through. What if the code's collapse is not failure, but the first shudder of release? What if the monsters fading are not the predators, but the locked? Philippa Eilhart carved her will into Aretuza's spires, her study a labyrinth of elixirs and forbidden texts. The scent of burnt sage clung to her robes as she wove the code's first strands not to bind monsters, but to cage the ancient hum of elven blood that thrummed beneath the lodge's marble halls. Her legacy is the silence between heartbeats, the pause before a spell unravels. Eredin Breek Glaz moved like shadow through that silence, his silver blade etched with runes of the old world. He hunted Ciri not for coin, but for the lodge's cold calculus, a girl born of elven line, a key to unlock what the code sought to smother. The forests around Aretuza whispered his name, leaves curling at his passage, as if the land itself recoiled from his purpose. Ciri answered that hunt with a scream that split the sky. At 16 she turned the wild hunt's own fury upon them, her magic a storm of shattered stars. The lodge's archives still bleed ink from the day she burned their seals, her rage a beacon for all they sought to bury. What becomes of a prison when its warden becomes the key? Aretuza's walls remember the cost of such defiance not in screams, but in the quiet cracking of stone, the slow exhale of magic long denied. Beneath Aretuza's shattered spires, a medallion glints Witcher steel, etched with a sigil of the lodge, not a symbol of balance, a shackle, the code's neutrality. A lie polished by blood, sorcerers wrote it to cage what they could not unmake, elven magic seething in the continent's bones, they needed enforcers. Reluctant, ruthless, blind to the prison they maintained, The lodge and its ivory towers became both jailer and jailbreak, a feminist conspiracy, yes, but also a cold calculus. To save the realm, they bent the code's spine. Let a witcher kill a child of Sintra, let the elven well poison itself. The regalia buried here crowns, robes, shattered astrolabes bear silent witness. Each artifact a ledger entry, what was traded, what was sacrificed. The rebellion was quiet. No banners, no battle cries, just the slow, deliberate unraveling of a contract written in another tongue, another age. And the walls, they remember, not the rebellion. The compromise, the price paid in magic's slow exhale and the Witcher Code's first, unspoken fracture. The spires of Aretuza pierce a sky still scarred by the conjunction's first breath. There, in shadowed chambers, sorceresses wove the Witcher Code not as a shield for humanity, but as a noose for elven magic's restless spirit. The conjunction did not merely collide worlds, it unzipped a wound. Humans bled into the continent's veins, while elven echoes, fractured by their own exodus, coiled in the marrow of storms. The wild hunt, those spectral riders with eyes like dying stars, were not conquerors, they were refugees. And Aretuza, in its cold calculus, turned their hunger into a cipher. The lodge's rebellion was silent because it was written in absence. A single glyph erased from the code's third verse. A ritual unspoken, its incantation buried in the bones of a dead language. When the wild hunt descended on Novigrad, their hooves shaking the earth like a dying god's final cough, the witchers hesitated. The code, their iron scripture, had no answer for a monster born of elven sorrow. The sorceresses had not forbidden the kill, they had made it impossible. Let the witchers hunt, but let them hunt shadows. Let the continent bleed, but let the elves' true name remain unsaid. The Citadel's libraries reek of ozone and old parchment, where the price of this gambit is inked in margins. The wild hunt still comes, the code still bends. And beneath every sigil carved into a witcher's skin, a deeper truth festers. The protocol holds, but the wound never closes. What containment demands a cage without bars? What survival demands a silence louder than screams? The spires watch, the spires wait. And the continent, in its slow, gasping breath, remembers what it was never allowed to forget. Beneath Aretuza's shattered spires, a medallion glints, witcher steel etched with a sigil of the lodge, not a symbol of balance, a shackle, the code's neutrality. A lie polished by blood, sorcerers wrote it to cage what they could not unmake, elven magic seething in the continent's bones, they needed enforcers. Reluctant, ruthless, blind to the prison they maintained, the lodge and its ivory towers became both jailer and jailbreak, a feminist conspiracy, yes, but also a cold calculus. To save the realm, they bent the code's spine. Let a witcher kill a child of Sintra, let the elven well poison itself. The regalia buried here crowns, robes, shattered astrolabes bear silent witness. Each artifact a ledger entry, what was traded, what was sacrificed. The rebellion was quiet. No banners, no battle cries, just the slow, deliberate unraveling of a contract written in another tongue, another age. And the walls, they remember, not the rebellion. The compromise